Greetings, everyone. My name is Marissa Smith with the Alumni Association, and we're back with another 10 Things in 10 Minutes. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Jessie Ilhardt, who's featured in our summer issue of our Minnesota Alumni Magazine. And I'm super excited to be with you, Jessie, and to learn a little bit more about your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
You introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Marissa. I'm Jessie Ilhardt. I co-founded and now lead a nonprofit organization, VOCEL, that is focused on helping parents, teachers, and school leaders to provide really exemplary early education experiences to their children and their students, particularly in communities of color and areas of historical disinvestment here in Chicago, where I'm based.
That's great. Well, again, it's great to meet you, Jessie, and thanks for taking the time. For number two, could you tell us a little bit about how you came to do this work?
Absolutely. I started my career in teaching after leaving the University of Minnesota. I actually met a recruiter for Teach for America on campus at Minnesota, and then came to Chicago and taught preschool. And I saw how powerful teaching preschool could be, but only if it was really high quality education and if it was rooted in play and nurturing interactions. And unfortunately, far too many children weren't getting that strong early foundation, and it was setting them up for a really uphill battle in school and in life. And so that inspired me to start VOCEL.
That's fabulous. So now that you're in it, what would someone outside of your field find surprising or unexpected?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that folks outside the field of early education are never surprised at how exhausting it is. I think most people who have interacted with young children know how tiring their energy can be. But I do think that a lot of times folks are surprised by how much research and science is at the foundation of our work. Because at first glance, I think sometimes it seems like it's easy. Like, don't preschool teachers just play all day? But there's so much brain development that happens in the first years of life. And parents and teachers are the ones facilitating that through their interactions with children, through the learning environment that they create. I also think that folks might be surprised by the prevalence of inequity in the field of early childhood education. Even that concept of early education inequity, I think it can be really hard to wrap our heads around how there can be such big disparities in children's development and their learning experiences by like 2 or 3 years old. But that is the current reality. Much of that disparity is along the lines of race or family income, which means that our country is really setting up some children with this great foundation in the early years, but that's not the case across the board. So I think a couple of those, really surprise people when they get into the field, and sometimes excite them even more about being part of that work.
Oh, that's great to hear. And if I could summarize what I heard you say, it's, we've got all this great research now. We know what works, and it's about making sure that everyone has access to the latest and greatest research.
100%. Yeah. At VOCEL, we talk about this term of democratizing brain science. So saying like, we have the science, we have the research, it's sort of locked up in these journals sometimes, or it's implemented at private schools that are not accessible to all. And how do we really democratize that, get that information into the hands of the masses of parents and teachers who can really use it?
Yeah. And it does seem to be happening a little bit more. This is just anecdotal, but as a parent on Instagram, I'm fed a lot of research-based information. And then my own little focus group, my lab at home, I try something and I'm like, oh, wow, that did actually work.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the powers of social media and just kind of the channels that we're seeing it's able to get that information out to more people. And I think we need to keep on with that.
That's great. So number 5, I'm sure in your role as a leader at your organization, you've had the opportunity to hire colleagues, hire folks for your organization. What is the most important thing you look for in someone you hire?
Yeah, I think that, gosh, this really got my wheels turning, thinking about that, because in some ways it varies depending on the role that we're hiring for, right? Like what is going to be super important to that person's success. But I think across the board, no matter what role we're hiring for at VOCEL, we look for humility and vulnerability. I think it's so brave when people, especially in like high stakes interview settings, acknowledge that they don't have all the answers. If anyone says they know it all or have it all together, I believe they're lying. And our team has a really strong culture. I think it's because we're willing to be vulnerable with one another and share hard moments, learn from them. And I think that willingness to be vulnerable means that we're more likely to take risks, which could open the door to the next big opportunity. So especially at a place like VOCEL, where we're entrepreneurial, kind of scrappy, and like research and development minded, it's really important to have someone who's willing to be vulnerable and take those risks.
That quality, that resonates with me so much. It's also a good segue into the next question, which asks you to be a little bit vulnerable.
Yes.
And it's, what is a mistake you've made? And how did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, it is. This is a moment of vulnerability. So about 5 years ago, VOCEL had to lay off a handful of people from our organization. We evolved in terms of the offerings that we had. Looking back, it was one of the best strategic decisions we could have made for our organizations. We closed one of our programs, and as a result, we were able to transfer some folks into new roles in a different program, but we didn't have space for everyone doing that work. And that was a really emotional time for all of us, because we were a close-knit team. As a leader and co-founder of the organization, that really hit hard, because it was people's livelihoods, right? And I found that for myself, I shifted into a different gear when that happened and didn't really show any emotion. And in hindsight, I wasn't my authentic self. I think people could see straight through it. A couple people on our team called me out for it, folks that are still on our team today. And I'm so grateful for that. They really gave me the chance to learn and grow as a leader. And I realized that in moments like that are so stressful and even traumatic, that there's often no perfect way to be that's going to please everyone. So the best thing we can do is to be ourselves. And that's something that I've taken with me as we've navigated other challenging situations since.
Oh, wow. What a moment of learning and wisdom, and really challenging one at that, but great advice to carry forward into the future. And the next question on that same token is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Gosh, so much. I would say it's hard to pick just one piece, but I would say probably a piece of advice that actually came to me as a parent, not as a professional, but I think it applies, was to expect change. Just that idea that when you're in a tough time, or like a rough season of life, or a rough phase as a parent, your child's in a tough phase, right? That it's likely to change soon enough. And I think that can really help weather the storm when we're in a tough moment, maybe against a deadline and working really hard, longer, maybe hours than we want to or are used to. Knowing that change is coming can help weather that storm. But also on the flip side of that, I think when everything is like rolling on all cylinders, going really well, that's likely to change too. So not to get too caught up in evaluating our like, is everything going well right now or not, but to expect that things will always be changing. I think for that reason, it helps me feel more comfortable that how things are going in a particular moment can't drive my identity or my self-concept. Really, I need to feel strong and confident in myself, whether things around me are going okay or whether it's a tough time.
Oh, that's great advice. Needed to hear that today. I love it.
I have to remind myself it all the time.
Yes, yes. Okay, a fun one. Thinking back to your days on campus, what is or was your favorite restaurant or hidden gem? Where could we find you hanging out?
Things have changed so much in Dinkytown since I was there, but I used to be at Annie's quite a bit for milkshakes and fries, and spent a lot of time also at Mesa Pizza, getting some late night mac and cheese slices. Off campus, though, I also loved having date night with my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband and the father of my kiddos. We loved Cafe L'Arcat by Loring Park.
Oh, great classics you named there. Are you an East Bank, West Bank, or St. Paul campus girl?
West Bank all the way. I lived in Middlebrook Hall my freshman and sophomore year. I have so many good memories of walking over the bridge between East and West Bank. I remember that was always my time to talk with my mom. She'd always say did you make it to the end of the bridge yet? Just funny because now I call her when I'm driving home from work to pick up my kids. So it's commute time has replaced that. But yeah, many great times on West Bank, and still some of, like I said, my husband, who I met in the dorms in Middlebrook, and a lot of our closest friends are from there as well.
That's great. West Bank, best bank.
That's right.
And finally, is there anything else you'd like to share with your fellow alumni?
I think there's, I've realized how much power there is in being a professional and also a mom, and thinking about the kind of shared learning across those experiences. I have a 6-year-old and an almost 2-year-old who definitely keep me on my toes. There's never a shortage of work to do or things to do on the to-do list. And I think in college, I really prided myself on doing everything well, being able to balance it all. And now I've found comfort in realizing we don't have to do everything to the best of our abilities. One week we might be this amazingly attentive parent who has long conversations with our kids and makes healthy home cooked meals. And the next week we might kill it on a project at work, but be less understanding with our kids. And I think there's something so healthy about that flow. And I think, in college, I really felt like we had to be perfect all the time. And that was, I'm sure, something I put on myself, but I imagine other alumni could relate to as well. And I love thinking that it's, okay to be that perfectly imperfect person, and would hope that, all of my fellow alumni find solace in that too.
I am confident other alumni will feel that because I feel that. And that's a really great reminder to just embrace the ambiguity and the perfect imperfections, as you said. Yeah. Well, Jessie, thank you so much. I so enjoyed talking to you and learning more about your background and your story and your interests. And I hope everyone will check out Jessie's story in the summer issue of the Minnesota Alumni Magazine. And go Gophers and Sky U Ma.
Go Gophers.
All of that. Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you, Marissa.